All right. Welcome to Irrigation Orientation. My name is Yiling Zhuang. I'm the Water Resources Regional Specialized Agent in UF IFAS Extension Central District. I'm housed in Mid-Florida Research and Education Center in Apopka. So today I have a special speaker, my colleague in St. Johns County, Ms. Tara Freeman. She is the horticulture agent and a master gardener coordinator. So Tara, if you don't mind, would you please move to the next slide? So you can see we're at the middle of this irrigation orientation series. In last 3 weeks, we covered some basics like the challenges of water resources in Florida. And then we went a little bit into details. So like how to water according to plants' needs and show you some common mistakes of irrigation and landscape maintenance. And today we will switch the topic to reclaim water. So if you missed the past talks, so if you haven't registered the event, you probably won't get an email from me provided a link to the recording. So just like I mentioned at the beginning, all the webinars are recorded. If you want the link to the recording at this point, please send me an email because we are building the web page. Later, we'll have all the recordings and also the basics of irrigations and some fact sheets on the web page. So at this point, if you want to see the past recordings, please send me an email. And if you are interested in future topics, I encourage you to register. So in that way, you will automatically receive the handout of the talk and also the recordings with some additional resources. And with that, let's get today's talk started. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, today I have my special speaker. It's Ms. Tara Freeman. She's the horticulture agent and the master gardener coordinator in St. Johns County. We will tag a team and tell you what's the reclaim water do's and don'ts. And before we get into all the details, I would like to give everyone a bigger picture. It's just why we are using reclaimed water. So next slide, please. So you probably have already seen this map. This is the water resource caution areas. So that water resource caution areas means that area has some critical water supply problems in next 20 years. And from this map, you can see basically the whole Florida peninsula is covered in colors. It means the whole peninsula basically is within the water resource caution areas. Next slide, please. So if I want to show you one example, because I see some of you here are from Central Florida. So if you're from Central Florida, you probably have already heard the Central Florida Water Initiative. The reason I want to show you this example, it's not to single out because the map already show you most areas in Florida are within the water, like are facing some critical water supply. And this Central Florida Water Initiative is just a much bigger area because we've seen the critical water supply in local cities, in counties, and this is like 5 counties altogether to solve the critical water supply issues. Next slide, please. And I want to say critical, what does that mean? And that's the latest 2020 Central Florida Water Initiative Regional Water Supply Plan. So I basically just took that paragraph out, that sentence out. So it indicates the water supply plan indicates traditional resources alone cannot meet future water demands or currently permitted allocations without resulting in unacceptable impacts to water resources and related natural systems. So what does that mean? So next slide, please. Next slide, you can see I love this diagram. Now, actually, it's not really, I love that diagram. Actually, the numbers there are quite concerning, but this is a very good illustration, let you know what's the current critical water issues now. So for Central Florida Water Initiative area, the estimated groundwater availability is 760 million gallons per day, so which is the yellow dashed line. And the demand by 2040 is 855 million gallons per day. So you can see there's almost 530 million gallons per day of water in short. So that's the water supply plan indicated we need water conservation, and water conservation alone is not enough. We also need some alternative water supply options. So next slide, please. So what's alternative water supplies? Typically, groundwater is the main source for Florida's public water supply. It's the main water supply sources in Florida. So anything besides the traditional water supplies are considered as alternative water supplies. So in next few slides, I want to show you what are our alternative supply options and how much we are investing on alternative water supplies. Next slide, please. So this is the Florida Department of Environmental Protection annual report on regional water supply planning. So you can see it's reclaimed water is the most it's the major alternative water supply, followed by brackish groundwater. So if you're not familiar with brackish water, so there's really not like a scientific term of it, just generally speaking, anything between fresh water and seawater. So it just, in other words, if the dissolved solids are not higher than 35,000 milligram per liter, and that's considered as brackish water. So you can see most projects are reclaimed water projects. Next slide, please. So not surprised, you can also see it's how much money we are invested on reclaimed water. And that's a total alternative water supply projects so far cost about $5.1 billion, and reclaimed water accounts about almost to $2 billion. Next slide, please. And with all the projects completed, it's estimated to provide additional 800 million gallons water per day. However, even with additional 800 million gallons of water per day, it's only 69% of 2035 water demand. So I go back to the diagram I mentioned earlier. So we are investing a lot on alternative water supply projects. Reclaimed water is one of it. But even with reclaimed water, we still need to put water conservation on our mind. We also need to know how to properly use reclaimed water. So with that, I will hand it to Tara. She will tell you how to properly use reclaimed water.
All right, thank you so much, Yilin. So I'd like to start off by just saying that I have a very strong professional as well as personal interest in learning all about reclaimed water. It's used extensively in my community, as well as most other newer communities in my area of northern St. Johns County for irrigation in our lawns. So we are surrounded by reclaimed water daily when we go for walks, walk our dog, ride our bikes, or basically do anything outdoors. So I'm very curious about it and want to understand the safety aspects, the do's and don'ts. So when I was presented with the opportunity to develop a program on reclaimed water for this series, it was the impetus I needed to learn all I could about it. So I've consulted with all the latest research from IFAS as well as the EPA to bring this information to you. So what is reclaimed water exactly? Well, reclaimed water is wastewater that has been treated for reuse in the environment for certain purposes. So this opens up a lot of questions. wastewater from what? Is this toilet water or dishwasher water or sink water? And treated for reuse. How and where and how does this work? And is this safe? And for what purposes? So my goal is to answer these questions so you have a clear understanding of what exactly this mystery reclaimed water is, why it's an important resource, and how it can be safely used in our lives. And it's sticking on here. There we go. Okay. So when the wastewater flushed from your toilet or drained from your household sinks or washing machine or dishwasher even leaves your home, it flows through your community's sanitary sewer system to a wastewater treatment facility. The wastewater from homes, businesses, industries, and other facilities, it's treated by a variety of processes to remove or reduce solids and other pollutants and impurities. So this reclaimed water, which is also known as recycled water or reuse water, it's then discharged back into the waterways or piped into communities for reuse. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has stringent guidelines to keep biological factors in reclaimed water to a safe minimum. It's required to go through a minimum of 2 treatment processes, while many go through 3 to further disinfect and remove harmful chemicals. Now, this does not return it to its 100% natural consumable state. It does have minute amounts of pathogens, such as viruses, bacteria, protozoa, parasitic worms. Now, most of these are harmless to humans, and some are specific to plants and animals. Also, this wastewater is routinely inspected for fecal coliform, and while the levels are typically low, it should not be consumed or used for sanitary purposes. It can also have other pathogens, nutrients, and salts that make it unsuitable for consumption or bathing. So the treatment processes are designed to make the reclaimed water safe for its intended use, intended being the key word here. So let's just talk briefly about the different stages of treatment. So we said it needs to go through at least 2 stages, but most go through 3 as well. So the primary treatment, the water, the sewage water, it's held in a basin, so all the solid materials can settle to the bottom and get removed. And then in the second treatment, the water left behind is further treated to remove or degrade any of the remaining wastes. And then in the third treatment, this involves advanced removal of nutrients and other contaminants that weren't removed previously. All right, so reclaimed water, it's then discharged back into the waterways or piped into the communities for reuse. So if you take a moment to think about this, what sounds better for the environment? Discharging this water directly back into the waterways or using it in our landscapes? Well, if you think it's better to reuse, then you are correct. So let's go over the reasons why. Okay, so as Yelan was saying, nearly 1,000 people a day are moving to Florida. Development and urbanization, they impact both the supply and quality of water available. So looking ahead to future water demand scenarios, we're likely to need an additional 300 million gallons a day within the next 20 years. Recharging our groundwater aquifer is critical because it replaces the water withdrawn to meet the needs of the rapidly growing population. So it is the most environmentally beneficial solution to reducing nutrient loading to help offset future water supply needs and to provide for long-term growth in our area. So Florida actually leads the nation in the use of reclaimed water. But we still put on an average of only 45% of our statewide reclaimed water flows to some kind of beneficial use. So some examples of how it's used, the one that most of us are most familiar with is irrigating lawns and landscapes and even golf courses. agricultural irrigation. So it can be safely used to irrigate certain crops, citrus, and pasture lands. And we are going to talk more about this later on in today's program. It's used in street sweeping operations, car and bus washing, power generation, and even for decorative ponds, fountains, and other landscaping features. Fire protection. So if you see the purple fire hydrants, they're fed with reclaimed water. Dust control for construction situations, groundwater recharge, even cooling for a variety of industrial facilities and for other manufacturing processes. Can even be used in toilets that have a separate piping system in industrial and commercial buildings like hotels or certain apartment buildings. And then for natural system restoration, so high quality reclaimed water can be used to create, restore, and enhance wetlands. So lots of beneficial uses. Here is a pie chart. This is providing an overview of the wastewater treatment and reuse in the St. Johns River Water Management District from 2019. So just to kind of give you an example in that area, 31% is used in the public reuse systems, 9% for golf courses, 8% for other direct reuse, 9% groundwater recharge, 37% surface water recharge, and then 7% other disposal. So it's just kind of interesting to have an example of what one water management area uses it for. Okay, so how is it different from drinking water? Well, reclaimed water has been safely used for non-drinking purposes in Florida for more than 40 years. But because of its composition, this water source should never be used for drinking or sanitary purposes. That being said, there are no documented cases of adverse health effects from contact with reclaimed water in Florida, but you should still be aware that pathogens, nutrients, salts, metals, and emerging contaminants such as pharmaceuticals or traces of pharmaceuticals have been detected in reclaimed water. And the quality of reclaimed water is different from that of drinking water. Okay, so how do you know if you have reclaimed water? Just look for the purple pipes. So in Florida, it's required to use purple pipes, and they also always have signage next to it. In other states as well as internationally, purple is the color. So if you have reclaimed water, it's going through those purple pipes. And it's good to know it's illegal to connect a reclaimed water line to drinking water supply line. And they're also very careful to install proper backflow prevention to protect any drinking water from getting any sort of cross-contamination. All right, so as we've already discussed, reclaimed water has many beneficial uses in our lives. So it's ideal for irrigating lawn and landscapes, as well as certain agricultural crops. So let's explore both of these topics a little bit more. So you may be wondering, how safe is this for my yard and garden? Well, it often contains nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus. So that can be considered part of the fertilizer needs. The tricky thing is you don't know exactly how much nitrogen and phosphorus, so it's contributing a little bit. It's not enough to completely replace fertilizing, but it does have some amount of that in there. It contains elevated levels of salt, so certain plants can be harmed because they're sensitive to this. Plants like azaleas or crepe myrtles are a bit sensitive to salt water. And we'll talk about some more salt tolerant landscape plants in a little bit here. And also, if you live near the beach, you may have higher than normal levels of salt in your reclaimed water just because of that influence of seawater. But the really helpful thing is your reclaimed water provider, they do keep very careful data on the levels of salt as well as anything else in your reclaimed water. Years ago, I was curious and I reached out to them and they sent me a multi-page spreadsheets on all their latest testing. They were very open about it. And I know they will do that for residents as well if you're curious what's in it. But I will say that I had to take it to my colleague who has her PhD in water stuff to decipher it for me. It was all very technical, but the information is out there if you are interested. Okay, so since we're talking about watering our lawns and landscapes, I think it's important to take a moment to discuss what happens to plants when they're overwatered in general, okay? So that we're not tempted to overdo our reclaimed water use in our yards. So, overwatering contributes to myriad problems on and off the landscape in general. So root rot diseases, plant diseases such as take-all root rot, Pythium, Rhizoctonia, these are all very aggressive pathogens that thrive in wet soils. Also, foliar, leaf spot, and other fungal issues. These are triggered by prolonged leaf wetness. Overwatering and even just excess rainfall causes fertilizer and pesticides to leach down through the soil profile, which eventually enters the aquifer, which leads to non-point source pollution. Soil erosion and nutrient runoff, these are also results of excess watering. So if you think about it, where does water run off to? So it's going to go down your driveway into your sewer system or down your street, but ultimately it's ending up in a waterway. And think about what does reclaimed water have in it? Well, it does have a certain amount of nutrients and other things. So would we want to add more nutrients to the waterway? I know you were all there saying, nope, we don't want to do that because it's non-point source pollution and it can lead to harmful algal blooms. So my point in like going through this is just to remember, overwatering is overwatering regardless of the water source. So if you use reclaimed water for lawn irrigation, overwatering is still going to cause the same damage as overwatering with other water sources. And in addition to other potential issues, that we discussed previously, such as, salts, pathogens, or just, excess nutrients going into the waterways. So, now that we're reminded of the negative effects of overwatering, what else can we do to prevent this? Well, micro irrigation is our friend for landscape plants because it targets the irrigation just to the roots where the plants need it. It's not going to water the foliage. It's not going to put it in unnecessary places. It's going to keep it where we want it, and it's going to use it strategically, and you don't need to use it any more than necessary. So you just put down the right amount, turn it off. And this is really important, especially in our hot, humid Florida summers, because we really can't help when all that rain falls on the foliage, but we can prevent our own irrigation practices from unnecessarily contributing to issues like fungus, rot, etc. Okay, so we've talked about some great ways to use reclaimed water and how that can be beneficial in the environment. And so let's now talk about some don'ts, reclaimed water don'ts. So, while it's been highly treated and disinfected, it may still contain higher levels of salts, nutrients, pathogens, than is considered safe for consumption. So hopefully by now you understand, and hopefully you probably knew it already. It's not for drinking or sanitary purposes. Maybe now you just know a little bit more why. So it's not to be used for body contact recreation. So swimming pools, hot tubs, anything like that. Cooking or drinking. So you don't want to connect your house pipes to the purple pipes. And there are certain vegetable and herb crops that it is not suitable to irrigate with, and others that it can work. So let's explore that. Okay. So before using reclaimed water in your edible garden, it's just important to have a clear understanding of what it is and how it can be safely used. So, and I'm going to read part of the slide, so forgive me for slide reading, but it's important information. So this is from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and it states reclaimed water should not be directly applied to the surface of vegetables or other edible crops that are not peeled, cooked, or thermally processed before being consumed. So that means fruits and vegetables that have been directly irrigated with reclaimed water may be consumed if they are peeled or cooked. Also, I need to move this out of my way here. Indirect application. So indirect, that means for homeowners, that's going to mean drip irrigation. So indirect methods where reclaimed water doesn't touch the edible portion of the crop is considered safe for crops that are not peeled, cooked, or thermally processed before consumption. So salt tolerant fruit trees and shrubs, the salt tolerant ones, because you remember reclaimed water does have a certain amount of salt in them, they can be irrigated with reclaimed water because it's not going to be touching the edible parts of the plant. But vegetables and herbs that are consumed fresh, where the water is going to touch the edible part, such as lettuce, thyme, oregano, strawberries, I'm sure you can think of a bunch of others, they should not be irrigated with reclaimed water because it's just too hard to not let it touch the leaves, right? So let's talk a little bit about salts in crops. So salt water in general, whether it's from reclaimed or you live near the beach and you get salt inundation during big storms or hurricanes. So salts in general can be very damaging to plants. Now the reclaimed water doesn't tend to have the same effect as, the inundation you would get after a hurricane if you live on the beach, but it still has some amount. So it can cause foliar damage. It can reduce the germinating and rooting of your plants, and it can reduce the plant's ability to absorb the water. So looking at certain landscape plants that are more salt tolerant, here's a list. Some examples. Now these would be considered moderate to highly salt tolerant. You've got your American holly, eastern red cedar, southern magnolia, firebush, Simpson stopper, yucca, wild coffee, beach verbena, blanket flower, dune sunflower, muhly grass, and there are many others. I know there are, a few EDIS publications, IFAS publications on this. I also have a fact sheet on salt tolerant landscapes. And that's if you were just to Google search salt tolerant landscapes and then put my name or IFAS St. Johns County, it would pop up. So you're welcome to use that resource if you'd like to learn more. And then crops. So basically anything over 1,000 parts per million of salt, it's too high for most crops, but some that can handle a bit. So the highly salt tolerant crops would be bell peppers, broccoli, and loquat trees. Moderately salt tolerant, cauliflower, peas, squash, and sweet corn. And then some that are very low would be beans, celery, and cucumbers. So that would be not salt tolerant. Okay, so we are almost done with the formal part of the presentation. So I would like to ask you in the Q&A section, we're going to have a little fun just answering questions. These are just true, false. So I want you to put in there true or false. It is safe to fill a kiddie pool with reclaimed water. All right, do we have anyone typing?
Yes.
Okay.
I have all the answers in all indicated false.
False. Very good. So false. There we go. Good job, guys. False. Okay, true or false? I can safely irrigate my lawn with reclaimed water. So Yulin is looking at all of your answers for us.
So now I have answers in. Most said it's true.
Very good. You can safely irrigate your lawn with reclaimed water. How about this one? I can safely irrigate strawberries with reclaimed water.
Answers are coming in, all indicated false.
You guys are so smart. Yes, false. We don't want to irrigate the strawberries because it's just impossible to not get it on the fruit themselves. And you're not likely to cook the strawberries either. I can safely irrigate lettuce with reclaimed water.
Wow, I feel like I'm seeing waterfalls here. It's all false.
Very good. So
hard to keep up with all the answers.
I'm glad you're doing it. Thank you. But yes, because it would be too hard to prevent the water from actually touching the lettuce leaves. Reclaimed water is never to be used for drinking or sanitary purposes.
Wow, all indicated true.
Nice.
Great.
Very good. Reclaimed water can be used to irrigate certain crops when protocols for safety are adhered to based on guidance from the Environmental Protection Agency.
I'm waiting for the answers to come in. I guess this one's tricky.
Is this one tricky? Okay, so it can be used to irrigate certain crops when protocols for safety are adhered to based on guidance from the EPA.
I see true here.
Okay, yeah, it is true. You just follow their instructions when it comes to whether or not it's touching the foliage or not, and certain things. If you cook them, it's considered safe. And then using reclaimed water conserves potable drinking water while recharging groundwater.
I don't see any answers. I'm not sure. Oh, do I see any answer? Oh, yes. Now answers coming in.
Okay.
I thought that the function is not working. So true.
Yes, it's true. And I think this is our last one here. Reclaimed water is an extremely useful and sustainable resource.
Do I see more answers here? True.
You guys got it. You're so smart. Yes. So it is incredibly useful and sustainable when used for its intended purposes. So Yilin, that is the extent of my formal part of the program. We have references here, and if you would like to contact us, but would you like to open it up for questions?
Yeah, that's great.
Or do you have anything else you want to say on the topic?
Yeah, you covered all of it. Okay. That's great. Just want to let everyone know, I put the webinar series registering link in the chat box where you can access the link. And the publication Tara mentioned, the salt tolerant landscapes. I also put a direct link here. And after this webinar, as I said earlier, you will receive an email from me with a copy of today's presentation and a link to the recording. If like you want to watch that again, or you want to share with your friends, feel free to share with your friends, because extension is always best kept a secret. We like to share all the knowledge we have. With that, we are open to questions. It's the same. The chat box is already disabled. So if you have any questions, just use the Q&A function. So I see some questions coming in. So I will just, I'm not sure, Terry, if you can see that because it's moving really quick.
Yeah, I don't see it. Do I have to go under answered?
It's
Or
at
open?
open part.
Open. Okay.
I can read it to you. So
Okay.
what happens if I get sprayed in face by reclaimed water?
That is a good question. I mean, I wonder that all the time. When I walk my dog and we go through it. So, Yulin, I'd like to defer to you on your opinion there.
I think just like Tara mentioned, for reclaimed water, it does have pathogens. But I also want just the reclaimed water process at last, they still do disinfection. It's just that disinfection, it's not as thorough as drinking water disinfection. So after that process, it still contain some pathogens, but so far the research hasn't shown any virus or any passengers or bacteria in the reclaimed water cause any illness or any like adverse health impact. So what we say here is just like when you use reclaimed water without direct contact with it, it's for just for precautionary practice. So if that happened to you, I will still suggest like use portable water, use fresh water to wash it off. So just in case, because it still has elevated salt, it has elevated nitrates, something, especially if you have open skin, you don't know what's going to happen to you. I will still suggest to use portable water to wash your face. But meanwhile, I don't want you to freak out.
Yeah, and that's what I do. I'll get sprayed by it accidentally all the time. And just when I come back home, I'll just wash that part off, wash my arm off or whatever got it. And then I don't worry about it afterwards.
Yeah. So another question, actually, it's, I don't know if, how about pre-washed lettuce like you purchase in grocery store?
So
if you go to answered, you can see that question.
So I do see the question, but I'm not sure how to interpret the question.
Mhm.
I mean, pre-washed, it would not have been pre-washed with reclaimed water. So we're only talking like they would not have used reclaimed water to grow that crop. I think is that how you're taking it? So reclaimed water should never have ever in any part of the growing process touch that crop. So I wouldn't even worry about that. It's very specific, like citrus, because they're watering the roots. They're not watering where, it would touch the crops.
Yeah, if you can elaborate the question a little bit, we can go back to visit that. And we move on to the next question. I don't know if Tara, you are ready for that. In the villages, reclaimed water smells like feces. Is this normal after it's been filtered?
Ours doesn't smell like that. Do you know?
I don't think it's normal. It shouldn't smell bad, but I know for the villages, they also use the storm water. So the village is a little bit, I don't know which reclaimed water you're referring to, because I know they also use the stormwater pond water and get to irrigation, landscape irrigation. So generally, your reclaimed water shouldn't smell because again, it has been through the disinfection process, and it already, like Tara mentioned earlier, already went through at least the secondary wastewater treatment process. So already remove a large amount of organic matters and other contaminants. Shouldn't smell bad. All right. So the next question here is, I replaced my front lawn zoysia Empire 3 and choose to hand water with a hose 3 times a day for 2 weeks rather than use reclaimed water for initial watering. My soil pH is 7.3 and reclaimed water is alkaline. Do you agree? Thank you.
Okay, so picture just
it moved. Yeah.
I'll find it again. Okay, so it disappeared from my end, but yes, so lawn turf does prefer a neutral pH of 7.0. So I can see you're thinking that when it was just for those first 2 weeks getting established, you wanted to give it like a really good start. And then, so I'll say, reclaimed water, it wouldn't all be alkaline. It might maybe in your area, like it could vary according to the area. Is that true, Elin? Okay, so I would say, when you start watering it or irrigating with the reclaimed water, maybe do a soil pH test, at the month point, and then maybe again a few months later to see, is it changing the pH? Is it so much that it's changing it? I would just encourage you to keep an eye on it and see what happens. And then if you do need to address it, you can reach out to your local extension agent, and we could figure out how to address it at that point.
Thank you, Tara. I have the next question. Actually, Tara and I already discussed. We briefly mentioned why is reclaimed water more expensive than potable water?
My take on it would be because they have to go through all those processes to clean it out. So there's more effort and labor and technology and products going into that than there is from just regular drinking water. Do you have more to add?
Yeah, that's basically, I asked that same question to a water, like utility manager. I'm like, why reclaimed water is more expensive? Or actually, I asked two-part question. First, why sewer is more expensive? Then I asked second part, why reclaimed water is more expensive? So the utility manager gave me a very straight answer. It's like, I give you clean water, you give me dirty water, I have to treat it. So in other words, to interpret that, just like Tara said, for wastewater treatment, the water has to go through more process. It requires more material, require more energy. So it's just the treatment cost is much higher. That's usually you see sewer cost about 3 times than your drinking water. So it's just the treatment, and similarly like reclaimed water. So it has it's the wastewater first. So it has to go through the wastewater treatment. It has more process. That's why the treatment cost is more. That's the short answer. Probably not that short. And if you wonder, it's that's also for our drinking water. Some of you may wonder why it doesn't need that much treatment, why it's much cheaper. So, because at this point, groundwater is the major water supply, and our groundwater is relatively good. So if your water source is groundwater, then the utility usually just pump the water out and go through disinfection. That's basically what they need to do. They don't need to do further treatment. That's why it doesn't require that material like chemicals you put to treat it, and it doesn't require that much energy. So that's why it's also relatively cheaper than wastewater. But some areas, if you use surface water as your drinking water source, then probably the treatment process is a little bit more complicated than groundwater as your drinking water source. All right, so we have more questions coming in. Seems wasteful to use potable water because it's less expensive. I'm a little bit confused here. Seems so. What's your take on this question? Okay. The next, the comment here, it's our potable water comes from the aquifer. Depends on the region, but most likely, yes, over 90% of Floridians get their water from groundwater. Yeah, I'm a little bit confused about the question. Potable water because it's less expensive. So if you can elaborate the question so we can know what you meant for that comment. And meanwhile, if you have any more questions, feel free to put in the Q&A. While some of you are typing the questions, I would like to let you know this is an 8-week long webinar series. So at the end of this webinar, probably it's in mid-August or late August, you will receive an email from me. It's an email, it's with a link to the survey. So we will appreciate if you can just take a couple minutes to take that survey. It will be a short survey. That survey will ask you what you have learned from this webinar series and how we can improve that. So we will greatly appreciate when you see the email from me, please do not delete it. Please click the link and take the survey for us. It's very important for all the agents. And Terry, I think you cover everything. I don't see more questions coming in.
Okay, well, good. Thank you for inviting me to teach this. This was really fun to learn about and research. I kind of want to go further with it. It's, you know, it's what we use where I live, and I know it's what's happening in all the newer neighborhoods. So it's important to understand how to safely use it. And I appreciate everybody who attended as well. So if you have further questions, you know, feel free to reach out.
That's great. Thank you, Tara. Thank you for your time. And thank you everyone for attending this webinar. We hope to see you next Thursday. Next Thursday, we will cover how to maintain your zoysia grass. So if you have zoysia grass, do not miss that webinar. Just some more. Okay, I saw a lot of good comments and thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye now.